Hi Libra, welcome to your November 2018 Astro Update. I'm Raina, and I'm really stoked about November for all of us because we have a couple of transits that are going to be occurring that to me speak of serendipity, good luck, and I love that kind of stuff. One of them is the North Node going into Cancer, and the North Node is our destiny. For you, this is in the 10th house of career. I'll get into that in a few minutes, but I wanted to just mention this. This is happening on November 7th because the very next day, Jupiter goes into Sagittarius, which is a sign that it rules, and this is going to be in your 3rd house of communication. So those two transits, a day apart from one another, going into these two houses may not be totally disconnected from one another. They could be totally connected. And this could point to possible career choices of yours in the near future. And we're talking about the transit of the North Node is 18 months. And the duration of the Jupiter transit is 13 months. So over the course of a year to a year and a half, you could be kind of led almost like invisibly in a certain direction that is your destiny. And I think a lot of times this is exactly what happens. I think the people that we know in life that are the most self-actualized, who seem to just kind of make the right choices most of the time. Those are people that really have a natural intuitive quality within themselves, that they really pay attention to how they feel and they really look for signs and symbols of whether or not they're in the right place. And so they're totally connected to everything. They're not kind of allowing anyone to influence them in the outer world. They're totally on their own path. And while they're on their path, though, they are receptive to any hints, any signs that things are telling them to go in one direction or the other. And you may get these with these particular areas of life. So let's start at the beginning, though, because we have the Sun in Scorpio for the first few weeks of the month. And for you, Libra, this is your 2nd house of earned income. And you may notice every year that you have a lot of focus in this area, a lot of creativity, I was going to say good luck, but that's kind of vague. What I mean is that it's not about good luck. Yeah, scratch that. It's more about this sense of feeling more prosperous, perhaps. Actually having an increase in income. I would say especially when Venus goes into this sector. And what's happening now, because we're in the midst of a Venus retrograde as the month begins, Venus has kind of held back a little bit. Venus is never far from the Sun. But when it retrogrades, it loses degrees. And so the interesting thing is that on November 1st, Venus goes, it's in retrograde motion. It goes to 29 degrees of Libra. So it goes back into your sign. It was there when it was direct, and now it's back there as a retrograde in the 1st house of the self. Actually, Libra, when the retrograde began, October 5th, it started in your 2nd house. So there is a story playing itself out here with the 1st and 2nd house employed in this retrograde. And I wonder if it's more about your inner world. All retrogrades are, but I'm talking about your self-esteem, because that could be the 2nd house, and then your image. A lot of Libras, I think, are hard on themselves about their physical appearance. And people who are Libra sun or Libra rising are typically born attractive. That is the irony of the situation. So you wouldn't think that somebody who is probably attractive would be obsessing about their looks, but it's not that way at all. Look at look at Hollywood. Look at Hollywood. There are a lot of beautiful people, especially women, who muck up their looks because they have, some kind of dysmorphia going on. So you might be kind of like connecting the dots in the last couple of months about how your looks, how your self-esteem has affected how you view yourself, how much time, how much money you put into your appearance. And maybe it's like affected your pocketbook even, where you're like, you know what, I'm spending way too much money on makeup, and it's really not making me look better. I'd look better with less makeup than more, or maybe no makeup. Or why am I wearing these clothes that are so fussy? Just because who am I trying to impress? I mean, you could really be having these kinds of conversations with yourself. And it's possible that it has something to do with money, that perhaps you've been trying to promote yourself in some way and it hasn't paid off, or you're wondering if you should, maybe advertising even. And you're just like, can I do this cheaper or just for free, maybe on a grassroots level? Who knows? But in any case, you're still thinking about these things as the month begins. And the sun is, I think, helping that second house to make you positive, because you may, when Venus is retrograding, you may have felt something that you were not sure about in terms of your finances or in terms of your ability to earn money, or maybe how much you're getting paid. And the sun in the second house gives you that self-esteem to really, like, if you need to ask for more money, maybe you have and you had some kind of an issue with it, and it really made you question yourself. Am I, did I go about that the right way? And the sun in the second house should put those fears to rest. On the 6th, Uranus goes back into Aries. Now, this is your opposite house. And this is the 7th house, okay? Now, you've had Uranus in that 7th house. That's the Uranus transit is 7 years. In May, it switched over into Taurus, but now, because it's retrograding, back into your 7th house. And this could affect you in the sense that if you, I don't know, like, the typical Libra person, I mean, thinking personally of those that I know one person who is a Libra who ended up getting a divorce in the last 7 years, but it's not like I know everybody out there. Uranus in the 7th house can be great, especially for a Libra, because it can spice up a marriage, a long-term relationship that's kind of like creaking along. For some people, this can be a situation where you have opened up your marriage. Now, this is not me and my personal belief system. I'm just saying. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. I mean, Uranus is about experimentation. It's about being out of the box, nonconformist. So and freedom loving. So when it comes to a committed partnership, which we consider monogamous, it could be like, what really is monogamy? Can I be monogamous with 3 other people? Mono means one, doesn't it? But there are, polyamorous relationships where they have their own set of ethics It's not just about sleeping around and being married. So that kind of thing you may have experimented with, or perhaps you were not on board with it, but you did it to get along with your partner because you didn't want to lose your partner. And now, you had the I was going to say you had the threesome. I don't know. I'm kind of being funny here. And maybe you didn't like it, and maybe you put it to bed, pardon the pun, and now they want it again. And that could be a negative influence because we have the retrograde, we have something coming back into play again. And it's like, opening that can of worms again. That has to do with a disruptive influence in the marriage, in the committed partnership. And it's like getting thrown a curveball. And another possibility is that many events happened with the marriage that threaten the marriage. It might not be directly with that particular partner, but maybe like other kinds of events in your life. Like, for instance, the 4th house of home and family, you have Pluto there, and now you have Saturn. So there might have been like family pressures, having to take care of an elderly parent or something along those lines, or some kind of real estate issue. Heavy responsibilities, a lot of upheaval in domestic affairs, and that put a strain on the relationship. And it just felt like curveballs one after the other. Well, this too shall pass because the retrograde is only lasting several months, and then it will be fully out of Aries. It's a 7-year cycle. You've already done your time, but, with the retrograde, sometimes it dips back into the former sign again, as it is now. So that's happening. And then we have, what else do we have here? Well, then the North Node in Cancer on the 7th. Now, the same day that the North Node goes into Cancer, which is an angular house, just like you have the 4th house. These are the houses of great importance according to astrology. The 1st, the 4th, the 7th, and the 10th. And what do you have? You have these cardinal signs occupying these houses. And so Librans have been going through a lot of transformative stuff. And by the way, this is a good time to mention that this is a general forecast. So the timing, may not be particularly on point. It does depend on your degree of sun or rising sign. If you're interested in me looking specifically at your chart and how this all shakes out for you, please check the link below. There's a couple links to a natal chart interpretation I offer and stuff like that, because it really does make a difference. But in general, I mean, now that I think about it, Libra really is being sorely tested here. And all the cardinal signs are. And I've just in my personal life, I've seen cardinal sign people or people who have prominent cardinal signs who have, gone through major changes in a relatively short period of time, like within the last 10 years or so. And a lot of these things were probably festering. So it's not like they were always a total surprise, but still. So you have a lot of this kind of challenging stuff going on, but the North Node in the 10th house is actually very nice because this means that you can really step into your public role, Libra, and this is your destiny. This is what you came here to do at this time in 2018 and 2019. I don't know. It'll probably be going into 2020, actually, because 18 months, if you do the math. But yeah. And for some people, this may be a totally different line of work. And I don't even like to use the word work with career because it's an embodiment of you and how others will see you. based upon your talents, the skills that you bring to the world to help people. But, you know, the 6th house is the house of work. And to me, it's the house of service. So it's like that humility. It's how we humbly offer our abilities to others to help them. To me, the 10th house is the glory, is you receiving the recognition, since it's your place in the world. So finding your place in the world. Maybe there are some Librans out there who feel that they have never really known what they should have come here to do. And maybe you've kind of fallen into place. You could be 50 years old and this happens. It's not just a question of being 30. You could be 50, 40. And this will probably make you feel really good because Libra is one of those signs. That's why you tend to go into the legal profession, because you can see all sides of an issue, including like, what should I do? That's where all that infamous indecisiveness comes from. So you may really feel like, hey, this is it. This is what I think I'm all about. And on that same day, we have a new moon in Scorpio. 2nd house, earned income. Are these things connected? Possibly. Just like having the North Node going into Cancer in your 10th house, and then the next day having Jupiter going into Sagittarius in the 3rd house of communication. Now, communication is right up your alley as well, because as an air sign, you're all about communication. So that's another thing to consider, is that with Jupiter going into the 3rd house, you can have luck in teaching and learning, public speaking, in other words. And of course, being a teacher is a form of public speaking, but also the internet and writing projects. So that is definitely connected to what I would associate with an air sign, because in the universal chart, Gemini rules this house. So it's all about what Gemini represents. So if you're somebody who has always wanted to be a journalist, or maybe even it's a citizen journalist where you are doing this on your own, there's a lot of that nowadays. People are just picking up the baton, and they are doing things on their own if they're interested in political issues. Being a person who disseminates information in an ethical and non-biased way, definitely something that a Libra person would be good at. And being accurate, not having an agenda, that could be right up your alley. And that isn't something you have to wait around to get hired to do. You might just do it yourself and maybe start a YouTube channel, and it takes off like gangbusters. On the 15th, Mars goes into Pisces. This is the 6th house of health for you. But this is an important thing to talk about up until that point. For the first 2 weeks of the month, Mars is in Aquarius. Remember, Mars went retrograde as well. We've had a year of retrogrades, big time. So now it's direct, but it's going over old ground. The 5th house is the house of romance. It's your fellow air sign. It forms a trine. It's very positive to you. And this could be some kind of a relationship that you had in the past that you're reigniting. This also because of the Venus retrograde until the 16th. So that's very interesting, you know? You have Venus in your sign, retrograding, and Mars in the 5th house. Mars can be recreational sex, and the 5th house can be, the 5th house is recreational sex and Mars is your sex drive. So you do the math. And you have Venus retrograding still. So it can be an affair with somebody from the past. And you're reigniting it. Now again, with Uranus going back in that 7th house, maybe you have opened up your marriage and both you and your partner, your spouse, know that the other is, going outside of the marriage. And you might be doing this very consciously because you want to see if you still want to be with your partner. And my feeling is that as long as both parties are aware of this, it's not unethical because you're doing it for the greater good. You're doing this in order to see if you still want to be with that person. And sometimes, people get married when they're 21 years old and they've never had another relationship, and they maybe over-idealize it even. So sometimes these kinds of things can actually help a marriage overall if both people are honest about why they're going into it. So Mars goes into the 6th house. That's the house of work and health. You may start getting off your butt and start exercising. I'm saying that facetiously. I'm sure there's a lot of there are a lot of Libra people who work out, but Libra is a sign, because it's ruled by Venus, of being kind of languid, of not liking to get its getting its hands dirty. So not really liking physical work, not liking things that are too strenuous. So you might prefer something like yoga if you're going to exercise, because it has more languid movements a lot of times, and it's gentler. It has more grace. You don't sweat like a pig. And maybe you realize, I have to kind of get my heart rate up. I really need to, look alive here. Or just for whatever reason, or it can affect the workplace. Maybe there is some kind of conflict in the workplace and you have to deal with that. Conflict with a coworker, for instance. Just remember that when Mars is in that sector, if something presents itself along those lines, you can stay above the fray. Usually Libra people do have a tendency, but you might have Aries. Maybe you have a moon in Aries and you like to spar with people. Don't take the bait. Okay, so Venus goes direct the next day, and this is in that 1st house. So things should start to progress quite nicely. If you've seen any kind of hiccup with your income, it should get better pretty quickly. Venus moves very rapidly through a sign, and it's going to be in a late degree of, 25 degrees, I believe it is, of Libra. So it's almost in Scorpio anyway. And it'll go back into that 2nd house before you know it, and things will really rock and roll. Mercury retrogrades in Sagittarius the same day that Venus goes direct in your sign. So it's like, there again, that's the story of 2018, is it not? And so once again, we have to deal with this retrograde stuff. And luckily, in December, because the Mercury retrograde is only 3.5 weeks, So once Mercury goes direct on December 6th, we have a new moon in that same house, which is the house that it retrogrades, the third house, the very next day, and it's a green light again. So I should say that Mercury is actually going to dip back into Scorpio, so it's going to go back into your second house. So that could be something about rethinking a writing project or some kind of situation, maybe concerning a contract, especially if you have recently gotten hired. Libra, you may have, maybe that's kind of what has been going on, salary negotiations. And with Mars in the sixth house, there could be like kind of conflicts along those lines. Or even if you've already been at a place of employment, because I think it would be more along the lines of somebody who has already worked at this place. You don't typically have conflict with people at the workplace if you just started out. So it's probably something that has to do with wanting more money and wondering, do I deserve more money? And resolving it at some point. But there could be a little bit of still some kind of holdup even until the first week of December. So just keep that in mind and don't sweat the small stuff because it's very temporary. And on the 22nd, there's a full moon in Gemini. And Gemini is your ninth house. And so that could be a situation of maybe some, if you were taking any kind of university courses, you could be like finished. And yes, you can graduate from university in November or December. I did in December because that was the end of the semester when I went back to get my bachelor's degree. I actually that was just the way it worked out. And I'm sure even, and we don't have to get legalistic about this. This could be like you wrapping it up. Maybe you actually get your degree in December. But it can also be like any kind of travel arrangements. Maybe you finally have, gotten everything together, and maybe this is for a trip that you're taking during the holidays. And this could be this could be on the mental level where you have this kind of a eureka moment and you realize your life path, because the ninth house is the God house and it's your personal philosophy of life. And Libra is a very, I would say, bubbly, effervescent and sociable type of a person. So you are the kind of individual that people love to have at parties. You've got the social graces down pat, and you're just kind-hearted, and you don't like to make people feel bad. So you're the kind of person that others like to have around, and you're also intelligent to boot. So having these philosophical insights is not something that you necessarily, sign up for, because you have your own area of, I was going to say expertise, or you specialize in a certain area. But because of these challenges to your angular houses, you may have had to do a lot of deep thinking in recent years. And this may be kind of the culmination of that, where you're kind of realizing, wow, now I see why I had to go through all of this. And it kind of like lights your way. I think of the Hermit card in the Tarot, holding that lantern. And there's that light, the inner light. And maybe you are having that illumination yourself, and that is helping you. And that can even help you with outer matters like career, because if you are able to be guided spiritually, I think that you naturally become aligned. And the interesting thing about it is that after this transit of the North Node in your house of career, the way the transit works is it goes backwards. So it's actually going to go into your 9th house, the North Node. And that might be the time when your spiritual life really goes on fire, because right now you have a lot of emphasis on career matters. And once you get that nailed down, then the universe is going to show you your destiny in terms of your spiritual life. So that might be very cool. So then on the 24th, Neptune goes direct in Pisces in that 6th house of health. And you may have had some kind of health condition revealed to you from the time that Neptune was retrograding. I can't remember when it went retrograde. This is a very long-term transit with Neptune in the 6th house. I can't remember when it's going to leave. I think it's like 2024 or even later than that, maybe 2025. And, you know, as you get older, I mean, even if that's 7 years from now, it's not, it can go by pretty quickly. But Neptune in the 6th house can lead to mysterious symptoms, health symptoms that are hard to diagnose. So you may have gotten a little bit of insight into something like that, but then it kind of goes back into stealth mode. So just be aware of these things, and don't allow confusion to stop you from taking the appropriate measures. Also, yeah, because I was going to say, you know, Neptune can relate to confusion. And the other thing, too, is that Neptune is a spiritual influence, and it's on the 6th house of work. So there can be a real longing for a more spiritual profession. And when I say profession, I usually think of the 10th house, but I'm talking about service to others. So even if it's something that you kind of explore, but you are not actually doing at the moment, it might behoove you to check into some kind of alternative therapies that you might want to do as a career sometime down the line. And this can include Reiki healing, shamanic healing, and there are other types. I mean, I would say any kind of drugless therapies, homeopathy, or energetic work, even like Bach remedies, and explore these in general, because it might be helpful to you, and possibly even as something that you would do. And you might even volunteer your services to others along these lines, because sometimes I know with Reiki, when I was trained, that people sometimes do it on their pets, and the 6th house is pets, by the way, too. So just having the skills, the knowledge to be able to utilize these things is amazing. And by the way, Jupiter in the 3rd house means that you can benefit from getting these types of certificates. And as opposed to the opposite house, which is the 9th house of university level study, this is an area where you can get these certificates. I mean, gosh, a Reiki workshop is only like 1 day or 2 days at the most, and then you get a certain level certified. And some of these other energy healing modalities the same, where it's very short term. And addition to your life personally, not to mention a possible career choice in the future, can be immeasurable. So that's very exciting. Okay, that's what I have for you, Libra. And as I stated before, if you're interested in a personal reading, especially, let's see, as I record this, I'm halfway through October. So for some of you, you're just having your solar return, or you just recently had it and you want to kind of look at the trends that are coming up for you and that you've been dealing with already, to make more sense of your life, and to also look at some of your innate gifts that you might not have explored. Just check me out below. And I wish you all the best. Bye.